Welcome. My name is Joe Vecchio, and I'm director of the Lestat Community Film Series. And tonight we have a special event that Walter Max Meyer has been working on very diligently for many weeks now. And I've seen the film. It's great. It's hard to imagine that it took till 1996 for these events to happen in court. But anyway, delay Max Meyer.
I didn't set out to become like the spokesperson for bullying. It just sort of happened. I wrote this book, Rounding Third, in 2009, and it didn't sell all that well, to be quite frankly. Actually, I launched it the week my father died, so a lot of the public relations I had planned never happened. And then that kind of it. And then with the bullying crisis that hit mainly last fall with a whole rash of kids killing themselves, my hometown paper, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Gay.com, Apocalypse, which is a local lesbian website, a bunch of places asked me to write about this crisis, and suddenly I became this bullying expert, and this spring Arizona State paid me to come out there and speak to them and show this movie. They asked if I would be willing to intro this movie, and I found it a great movie. What I found interesting is how much, considering my book was done 2 years ago, it sort of anticipated a lot of what's going on now. There's a section in here, one of the teachers is tired of watching the kids get bullied and stands up to the principal and says, you better watch out because school principals and school boards are getting sued for failing to protect their students. And when I made that reference, I knew there was this landmark case, but I didn't know I would ever be introducing movies about it. And getting asked to talk about it. Also, I have another character in here trying to reassure one of the kids, it gets better. Years before the It Gets Better campaign takes off. Todd is a good friend that I know would show up to support me, but I don't flatter myself that it's the only reason he's here. He is here to speak about this issue because it's near and dear to his heart as well, and the city council and the school board all wanting to speak about this. So I will let Todd say a few words, and then we'll watch the movie, and then Kevin and I will lead a little discussion afterwards. And thank you so much for coming, Todd.
Good evening, everyone. I will be very brief because you're here to see the film. But I want to start by just asking, how many of you all have personally experienced bullying in your upbringing? And it's dark in here, but I can see that's the vast majority of hands in the room. I'm glad that you'd be here because of this crisis, if there's a silver lining in it, is that it's galvanizing people to say that, as Max was just noting, this is far from over. And yet we who may have experienced this can do something to stop it. And I'm grateful. Has anyone read Walt's book, Rounding Third? I have. I highly recommend it. I think it's a phenomenal book. It does a great job of really detailing what a lot of certainly LGBT youth, but really, frankly, all children are dealing with in our schools. And I want to thank any educator who's here because naturally you're the ones that sort of see this firsthand and are capable of really alerting parents and others to try and stop this. Our city is a great city, and we don't have one single person that we can spare in creating America's finest city that we dream of. And that's not sparing children to bullying, to suicide, and some of the other things that we have seen. I want to thank my friend and colleague, Kevin Bieser, who really led the effort on our school board to get a more comprehensive bullying policy into our schools, into every single one of them. It's not going to just be one teacher who happens to really care about this issue. It's something that's institutionalized now, thanks to Kevin and his leadership. And so tonight's film, I think we're all interested to see more. And of course, really the discussion afterwards, how can we make this work in our own communities, in our own neighborhoods? Thank you all for being here. Thank you for choosing to be a part of the solution. And thank you to Walt, to Joe, to Lestat for opening this up so we have a venue right here in Normal Heights to talk about this important issue. Thank you all for giving me a few moments.
And that piece of history just isn't in the history books. And so it's not just about LGBT history, it's also about Filipino, Asian Pacific Islander history, and it's about the contribution that disabled people have made to our country as well. So that's really what it's about. And our Department of Academics and Curriculum and History, they're working right now in San Diego Unified to create the specific curriculum and information and provide information to high school history teachers that teach that era, because different years of school, there's a different curriculum focus in the state of California. 7th grade, you learn about Japanese history and Chinese history, and then when you get in 8th grade, you learn about the Civil War and those eras. When you get into high school, your sophomore, junior year, that's when you're learning about the civil rights movement and U.S. history in the 20th century. And so that's really when that content would be exposed to children in high school. And also it's very important that a major tone or a major underlying piece of AB 48 is that it must be age appropriate. So I think that just dispels any of the worst fears of the opponents that are just afraid of, you know, having an open, democratic, free society.
And by the way, you can stop plugging.
Any questions?
You can stop plugging Filipino
Right
history.
here.
Todd left. She had her hand up a while.
No, he's right there. I can see him.
He's still here.
Yeah. See, he has one of those disco neon bracelets on.
Before we take questions, I just want, you know, being a math guy, I'm sure you know the Alan Turing story. And that to me is just the tragedy of, if you don't know, Alan Turing was a mathematician from Oxford who broke the German code during World War II. Winston Churchill said he was the most valuable single man to the Allied World War II effort. He was knighted in secret by Churchill because they were afraid if they did it publicly, the Germans would try to assassinate him. And after World War II, he was exposed as being a homosexual and harassed by the police till he committed suicide. He eventually invented the forerunner of the modern computer to break the German code, and yet you don't learn about him, and you think of wasting one of those brilliant minds of the 20th century. So if kids would learn about this, these are gay people who made huge contributions to our society.
One of the other things that I have heard, I can't verify it because I didn't learn about this in history class, but one of the things that I have heard several times is that when, at the end of World War II, when the Allied forces were coming upon a lot of the death camps and the work camps, they would let everybody out. They would let out the political prisoners. They would let out the Jews. They would let out, you know, the communists. But they kept in the homosexuals in the camps. It is that there's accountability now, you know, and I think that is in part because of the results of the lawsuit. You know, I'll never forget, we were sitting at a board meeting, and I loved looking down at legal and saying, you know, this is a potential legal financial liability. And I just look right at Larry Shanky, who's our general counsel, and he's right. You know, he knows that this is a financial liability, and especially in these challenging financial times, we have to do what's right so that we can avoid these kinds of entanglements and save the taxpayers' money.
Yes.
We have a lot of parents on the Safe Schools Task Force, and that's really gratifying to see. I'm trying to get more students that are involved in GSAs involved also. But we do have a lot of parents that are involved in the Safe Schools Task Force, and their input, their perspective on the problem is really helped us in creating problems.
Help parents to take responsibility.
Well, I can't speak to the law that was recently passed. I think AB 1156, the online bullying from Sacramento. I think our representatives in Sacramento, Tony Atkins, State Senator Chris Kehoe, they've really been champions in this arena up in Sacramento to make sure that these policies are passed. For example, when we passed the school district's anti-bullying policy in April, we also passed a resolution supporting Seth's law. And so we're working in tandem to make sure that not only are some of the things that we're spearheading in San Diego unified, but they're also being made the law of the land for the whole state of California. I can't speak to the specific law that says or doesn't say what parents should or shouldn't do, but it does open up liability issues. We are treating assault as assault and battery now in schools with that kind of gravity, because that's what it is. Just because it's being perpetrated by a minor doesn't mean it's not a crime. And so to the extent that parents are financially liable for the actions of their children, you know, I see that that is being something that could, you know, play itself out later.
So there isn't any support groups for parents? No.
Oh, there is. There's PFLAG. Yeah.
Oh.
And
Parents
There's nothing that's in the law that's helping parents to be more responsible for their own behavior that helps students to learn to bully.
well, one thing that
Well, a lot of the reality is that when a student is bullying, they're really just echoing the sentiment that they're hearing at home.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I liked in this policy is it requires mandatory counseling with the bully, and that too often they just discipline this kid, which if they just give him detention or whatever, then he's just even more upset because this gay kid got me in trouble. But they sit him down and say, what's the problem? As Kevin says, often they are being beaten at home, and that's why they've got to beat up on somebody else, or they are secretly gay. I read a column for one of the local gay magazines, Rage, and I just wrote about, you know, my own homophobia as a child because I was so afraid that somebody would think I was gay. I picked on other gay kids to cover for myself. And so there are issues here, and you see this in a lot of people. I mean, I think the reason Michelle Bachmann is so homophobic is she's afraid that Marcus is going to come out any day now. Marcus, her husband.
I just saw that on Facebook.
Yeah.
Didn't he yesterday?
No, not quite yet. He's getting close though.
I'll give it time.
But it's so. And one thing that, and I know Kevin is solidly behind this, is prevention is better than punishment. And the more education that we can have on these issues up front, people who know somebody gay, so allowing kids to have a GSA and to have support in their high school, they're less likely to bully. If they in schools where they have a age-appropriate gay education, people are less likely to bully. And all of these things, so the more we can educate kids and parents, the better off we are.
Really, it's about, I think, there's two things. First of all, I think you would be amazed at how progressive the children and youth of today really are.
In California.
I mean,
In California,
well,
not in
you know,
upstate New York.
well, are we talking about Santee? I mean, you know, but for the most part, you know, if you were to take a snapshot of students in middle school, for example, 8th grade, today versus 20 years ago, radically different. The level of acceptance and understanding is dramatically higher. Do we still have large segments of our student population and of our general population that are intolerant and mean-spirited for whatever reason? Yes, we do. So that's the first thing, is that we have come a long way in terms of being more accepting of the diversity of our culture. And, you know, so when we have a child, when I have a child and I overhear him call another kid a bad word, I always try to frame it in a context that they can understand, you know, and they know it's wrong. They know what's right and wrong. And they know it's wrong to be mean to other people. And, you know, so I always start, would you call that person, if it was an African American, the N-word? And they go, oh no. Well, this is the same kind of thing. And they go, yeah, I know, you know. And so then it's a teachable moment. It's about learning about how to be civil in a society. Whether or not you agree or disagree with whatever. And another statistic that I think is really important that I heard from a parent who had a son that was bullied, and he's straight. And is that she said that she had done some research, and that from the research she had looked at, 80% of the kids that are being called, you know, being bullied for being gay or lesbian, 80% of them are not gay or lesbian. They're just perceived that way because they're quiet, they're demure, they maybe have mannerisms or habits that are stereotypical. Maybe it's just some females that like to play sports. You know, there's a lot of misunderstanding going on in our schools, and that's what we have to do. We have to solve a lot of these misunderstandings with education and helping people to understand that that's really what we have to do as a society. A lot of the kids at my school are raised devout Catholic. They go to Catholic church 3 times a week down in the South Bay. Very strong Latino culture there. And even though they're taught in church a certain philosophy or perspective, they also understand the difference between being nice to other people and being mean. And I have 2 rules. Rule number 1, be nice. Everybody knows what that means. And rule number 2, everybody works and learns. That's it. That's what it's about in my classroom. So to answer your question about how do you deal with that, I think you just have to focus on the importance of helping students to understand that everybody has a right to a safe, positive learning environment, that nobody has a right to take that away from another kid.
He mentioned I did a thing in Saturday's Union Tribune about the difference between tolerance and understanding, and thank you for reading that. I like it when I write for Out and Advocate and Rage and gay magazines, but I prefer it when I can write for the LA Times or Union Tribune or Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And you know what Kevin was saying, right, is actually 82% of kids who get bullied for being gay are not. So one of the things we have to tell parents, because first of all, every parent assumes their kid is straight, right? Because I didn't raise a defective kid, so my kid's straight. And then the kid whose bloody nose you're saving may be your own. Just because your kid wants to play violin instead of basketball does not make him gay, and even if it did, he doesn't deserve to be bullied for that. And so any difference, anything that you want to do out of the ordinary, and I wrote an editorial for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette about this, about why are we making kids like fit these narrow little boxes instead of letting them express themselves however they want, as long as it doesn't hurt other kids.
Right. Like in 6th grade, I was on the volleyball team. I was the only guy, the only male student in 6th grade in my school's history that I know of to be on the volleyball team, and I caught a lot of flack for that. You know, but you know, I was the tallest kid in the school at the time, and we won first place. So, proof's in the pudding. But you know, but the bullying. I mean, in the 6th grade, I didn't know anything. I knew I had my Star Wars figures, and I liked to play volleyball, and that's all I knew. And so the bullying, I had no idea what it was about. I just knew that I was being picked on and teased for being different, for being on a volleyball team, because oh, that's a girl sport. What are you doing playing? So then I went out for basketball, you know. But
a man's sport, yeah.
Yeah, that piece in the movie really struck a chord with me also. But for me, being a teacher in a middle school, also, I saw that silent bystander were teachers at my school. And administrators, and counselors, and assistant principals. Because, like I said earlier, we have a very large Catholic Latino population, a lot of parents, you know, and a lot of very, very nervous people. And this is true in all schools across the country in education. Teachers, principals do not want to say the word G-A-Y.
Gay?
No,
Oh.
don't say that. Yeah, no. Even look at the school board. This San Diego Unified School Board has voted unanimously, time and time again, to support very strong, comprehensive anti-bullying policies, reporting guidelines, support for counselors, on and on and on. But yet, when we have discussions at board meetings, public board meetings, you can just watch. And everybody will dance around the word, and they will never say it. It's incredible. But to answer your question, that I think is what we have to do. We have to have that conversation with students about, you know, what do you do when you overhear this going on? What do you do when you see this happening? And that's where that 800 bullying hotline comes into play.
Yeah.
And I am fighting for that in our school district. Whether it's site-based, and that 800 number just goes directly to each school's safety office, or if it's district-wide. I think if it's district-wide, it'll be too much,
Yeah.
and we don't need to create another department in our central office where somebody can just sit there by the phone all day long.
No, we don't.
I think you know, at my school, the 800 number just rings directly to the school office.
So that's what I was going to ask. You do have something in effect at your school.
Yeah, where I teach down in the Sweetwater Union High School District, every school has an 800 hotline, anti-bullying anonymous hotline. And half the times when they call, we know who they're talking about, and we just, you know, we'll pull them in and talk to them, and then, you know, have the mediation with the counselors and the parents, the bully, the victim. And then have a conversation about what's going on and try to turn that into a teachable moment. Try to help that student realize that they can that they made a mistake, and that they can be a better person for it down the road. It works very effectively.
And you know, the old saying of all that's necessary for evil to flourish in the world is for good people to do nothing. You know, clearly not everyone in Nazi Germany was crazy and evil, but enough nice people sat on the sidelines while crazy evil was taking place. And yes, that has been taught, you know,
one of the things of going back to, and I'm sorry, Congressman Filner is here to talk about his days on the Freedom Ride, but that for people to step in, for somebody to just step in when a cop was beating somebody and say, why do you feel the need to do this? You know, it's obviously self-serving for the victim to ask that, but for some bystander who's not even impacted by this to say, why do you feel the need to do this? Because there is no good answer to that question, that often ends it right there. And as you say, that lynch mob mentality that can take over when there's a couple of bullies but nobody's saying anything, all it takes is one person to stand up, and then the other good people in the crowd are brave enough to say, you're right, you shouldn't be doing that, and then the mob mentality switches. So yes, that's a powerful thing. Thank you for bringing that up.
We have some things along those lines on sandy.net, the school district's website, that articulates and outlines reporting forms. What we're talking about and trying to do on the Safe Schools Task Force is to create a unique reporting form for bullying of any kind. You know, and that way it can be more specific and streamlined. Because if you look at the current parent tools for reporting incidents, it's kind of vague. And so we're working on, in the Safe Schools Task Force, of creating a much more specific reporting incident form. Point is highlighted in the movie. I mean, this kid was allowed to bully and be a thug, and nobody told him, stop it. This is not appropriate. There are different ways to behave and react, and try to get him going in a different track or direction in his life, and he ends up in jail on other things. What could this person's life have been like had there been that intervention, counseling, support, peer mediation, and help that person realize, being a bully and a thug, he's not going to be as successful in life. And guess what? His life is going to be difficult unless he changes the way that he treats other people.